Hi, Mr. Conrad, it's Deirdre. These are my aunt and uncle. This is my Uncle Joe. He's my godfather and he's my dad's younger brother. And this is his wife, Jen, and she was my confirmation sponsor. They are both from Brooklyn. And let's get started.
Okay.
How long have you been married?
So we got married in October 2008, so we've been married for over 16 years.
And I was your flower girl.
Yes, you were.
Yes.
How old were you when you met each other?
We met each other, I was 20 and Uncle Joe was 19. We met on September 13th, 2001.
You remember the exact day?
I remember the exact day because it was right after the terrorist attacks.
Oh.
And I had gone into the student lounge to check on friends' family.
Mhm.
And Uncle Joe was also in the student lounge that day. So it sticks in the mind under the circumstances.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And I remember the first thing you thought when you looked at me was, who hit you?
You had a bruise on
Because
your face. I thought
had
someone
a bruise
punched
on my
you.
face from after doing wisdom teeth removal.
Oh. So she thought that somebody...
She thought that
Somebody
somebody
hit
punched
him.
me in the face.
Thought somebody punched him in the face.
Describe your courtship. So, describe your relationship and, before you got engaged.
We were friends for 2.5 years before we started dating.
Okay.
We both were dating other people at the time. Neither one of those worked out. I pursued Uncle Joe.
Yep.
I told him how I felt about him. I told him I thought we should be dating. He did not agree at that time. He wanted to just be friends, and then a few months later he realized that we should be dating.
I think I realized it super late at night too, that I was like, no, I need to be dating this woman.
I think we were only dating
Worked out.
about 4 months the first time he told me he wanted to marry me.
Aww.
We were coming back from a Met Yankee game.
Yeah.
And I was leaning my head on his shoulder in the car, and he just looked at me and went, "I'm going to marry you." And we dated for 2.5 years before we got engaged.
Oh, wow.
We dated a long time before we got engaged. And then we were engaged for another almost 2.5 years.
But I'd given you a promise ring in that time, so.
Yes, the promise I'm buying you a bigger diamond ring,
Yes.
Wait, so that perfectly leads into the next question. Why did you decide to get married?
So we decided to get married because, well, one, of course, it took me a long time to realize that I wanted to be with this woman, but then I also realized during that time, I don't want to live the rest of my life without this woman. So I wanted to be with her and wake up next to her and just really show her the best possible life that I could give her.
I wanted to marry Uncle Joe because I liked making him happy. I liked being with him. Him bringing out the best in me, and I saw me bringing out the best in him. And how well we complemented each other and how well our beliefs and our desires for the future fit together.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so cute.
Thanks.
You kind of answered this already. Describe your engagement. Was it rough? Was it easy? Was it?
No. For the most part, it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long
I was gonna
engagement.
say it was a long time.
Yeah.
It was a long engagement, which I think was to our advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because planning a wedding is very stressful.
Yeah.
So seeing how the other person responds to that kind of stress is a good thing. It was pretty peaceful. By the end of it, I was begging to elope. I think 2 weeks before the wedding, I was like, let's just go to City Hall. We'll still do the whole big thing in a couple of weeks for everybody else, but let's just go to City Hall just for us.
Yeah.
And he was like, no. He was like, 2 more weeks, we'll be fine. We
So
called
you're just
off.
over it.
Yeah. We had one fight where we
Let's
called
do
off the
whole
wedding.
once, yeah.
Called off the wedding.
Yeah.
And it was funny because
Can you
even
elaborate on that story?
it was a fight about, it was 2 weeks before the wedding. And I think this is part of what played into the Can't We Just Elope. There was a fight about seating at the reception where family members who should not have had an opinion were putting a stressful situation into even more stressful situation because they couldn't mind their own business.
Okay.
And the statement was something along the lines of either you're on her side and your cousins sit where she thinks they should sit, or you're on my side because if you pick her side, there's not going to be a wedding to seat people at.
Wow.
And the funniest part about that was after the honeymoon, your dad said to us, so how many times did you guys call off the wedding when you were engaged? And we were like, just once. And your dad's response was, you're amateurs. So no, but pretty harmonious until I would say the last couple of weeks it was very stressful.
Yeah, and part of the reason why we took so long to do this engagement period was we had to save money. I mean, we had a big expensive Italian wedding, so we had to save the money for it, which we did very well harmoniously together. I'd say.
It was a nice wedding from the pictures I've seen. I have no recollection of it, unfortunately.
No, you were a part of it, even though you don't remember it.
Yeah. She was a part. She was part of the most important part of the day.
Exactly. So by the time you actually got married, how old were you?
I was 27 and Uncle Joe was 26.
Yep.
What were you looking for in a spouse? Like when you were like either before you guys were together, or just like what was your initial like list of things you wanted?
I wanted somebody who was smart, who was respectful, who was a hard worker, who had the same or similar enough worldview as I did. Somebody who had goals for the future, somebody who wanted to travel, somebody who was funny, somebody who knew that you need to have a mix of life. This in life needs to be handled seriously, and this in life can be handled with humor, and when each of those was the appropriate way to handle things. And Uncle Joe had all of those. I think I've brought a little more humor out in him.
You have.
It was always in there, but I think he's more comfortable expressing it now than he used to be.
True story. I wanted somebody kind and caring and loving and understood really the same family values that we have.
Yeah.
And understood how to operate with family, how to people to have friends as well, and have that good balance, and understand that the both of us, while we are married and we're a married couple, we're both still individuals, and we both still have our own individual lives and goals, and your Aunt Jen very much understands that, believes in that still. So that was all good. I wanted a good partner in life. I wanted somebody that I could enjoy being with, and at the same time is my teammate at home and literally abroad, because we've traveled the world together. But she's somebody that I can trust and rely on and lean on for just about everything, and she does the same with me. So that's probably one of the biggest things I wanted was a good teammate.
Do you think you found a good teammate?
Hell yeah.
How does the reality of marriage compare to what you expected marriage to be like?
I don't think, first of all, for the most part, I don't think how anyone pictures marriage is necessarily how it ends up. I think we expected to have done more things like travel. I think we both expected to have children. And those are different than what we necessarily pictured. I think, though, as far as our relationship between the two of us, it is what we were both hoping to have. It was both we wanted, what we both pictured. It hasn't been without struggle or difficult times. I think you don't think about those necessarily when you're engaged and when you're at the altar taking your vows, and we've managed to navigate those struggles, not always smoothly. Yeah. But it's our relationship is, I would say now, the best it's been the entire time we've been together.
Yeah. When people tell you all the time, it's how important communication is, and they're 100% right. When you're standing up there and you're saying those vows, you think you know what they are until life actually meets you with those things. Obviously, we've hit quite a few of those sickness and health. That your aunt has been there by my side through all of my medical procedures and surgery and all the things that's happened with family, and I've been doing the same with her through all those things as well. So you come through those, and yeah, they're hard when you're in them, but you as long as you stay together, you will come out stronger on the other side, which is something that people talk about, but you don't feel it until you actually experience it for yourself. So that's a big part of the difference between, in my mind, what you feel is going to be marriage and then what the reality of it is. But yeah, I agree that there are some times that we could have done things better, and we've learned from that, and we've come out stronger on the other side.
And do you think those difficulties made your relationship stronger and helped?
Because we continued to work through it rather than turning and running from it. We worked through those things, and that's what made us stronger, is doing the work.
And so that leads into my next question. How did your fertility journey affect your marriage?
That was probably one of the hardest parts of our marriage, for a lot of reasons. Our fertility journey, I feel that was one of the hardest parts of our marriage for a lot of reasons. You know, I didn't have a fertility issue in the traditional sense. I had a known genetic disorder that has a high probability of passing, and if it passes, it has a high probability of causing severe complications to a child: blindness, deafness, bone deformities, learning disabilities, spinal issues, nerve issues. And we are fortunate enough, and Uncle Joe knew all these things from when we were dating. I was always honest with him, and I told him before we were engaged, biological children may not be something that's possible for me without these risks. And we are lucky enough that science came along far enough that we could do genetic testing for that before we had children, and we went through IVF because of that. And that alone is an emotional journey. Physically, it's a lot for me. It got to the point where after we had finished and had 2 transfer failures where you're pregnant for a week and then you're told, no, you're not going to have a child, this pregnancy is not viable, where I wouldn't even go for the flu vaccine because the idea of another needle was something I could not bear. And it made me angry. It made me irritable. I was disappointed. I was heartbroken. I felt like a failure because this is something a woman's body is supposed to be able to do, and why can't I do it? And as the marriage aspect, I felt very upset that I knew Uncle Joe wanted to be a father. I knew he wanted to have children. And I felt like because of my body's failures, I was depriving him of something he wanted. And there was a time where I said to him, if you want a divorce and you want to find somebody who you can have children with, I will understand that. And his feeling on it was, well, I don't want to have children with somebody else. I want you, whether or not that means having children. And I think the depression and all that put a strain on our marriage because we were working as a team, but we weren't necessarily communicating our own feelings on it effectively. And, you know, there were days where Uncle Joe was being a great partner, but I was still angry at him because I felt like he would never understand my feelings on it. You know, he would come in and go, no, you have to get up and get out of bed today. You have to take a shower. You have to eat. Even though the things I didn't want to do. And that's what I needed to do. But at the time, it was a case of, well, he doesn't understand. He doesn't feel it the same way. And we've both come to a point where we realize that children may have not been God's plan for us. God's plan for us may have been fantastic aunt and uncle. And we are a fantastic aunt and uncle. And if this is our position in life and this is our plan for life, we're really good at this and we can do this. And because we have each other, we are able to continue to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, the struggle that I had was different than the struggle that you had naturally because I couldn't feel what you felt. But I felt something different, and a lot of it for me was helplessness and powerlessness, that there was nothing I could do other than to be as good and supportive as I possibly could to help you through all of that mental pain, that physical pain, all of the struggle that you went through. So being there for as much of that as I possibly could was what I could do. And that was a big part of the frustration for me, was that I couldn't possibly understand or feel that. And then after the second transfer and what happened after that, and I remember you asked me if I wanted you to do it again, and I said,
do you want to try again?
And I said no, because I couldn't bear to see you go through that again. I couldn't bear to see you go through all that pain again.
I think your exact phrase was, I have serious concerns about your mental and physical well-being if you go through this again.
Yeah.
And I think how we got through that is we realized that we're in a position where, yes, people who've had failed IVF. Yes, people who have had miscarriages will understand to a certain extent, but those children are real to us. And even though they may not be here, they are still our children. Mm-hmm. And they are still part of us. And that's something we understand together. And that's what helped us get through that, is that bond over this was ours.
I have nothing further for that. I think you guys covered everything.
Yeah.
This is a complete shift in topic. How important are money in marriage?
They are important. I don't think amount of money is nearly as important as views towards and about money. Mm-hmm. Yes, you should have the same goals as far as financially what you would want your life to look at. But agreeing on those things and agreeing how money should be spent, what's important to spend money on, how to save, how to invest are more important. Because if you have $50 million and one of you wants to clip coupons to save 50 cents on toothpaste and the other one wants to buy Prada shoes every day, that's still going to cause a problem no matter how much money is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sound like a broken record, but it still comes down to communication. Mm-hmm. Exactly. What are we spending money on? Why? I feel like you should be able to at least be able to make some just kind of discretionary purchases, but when it comes to big things, like anything else in a good relationship like that, you talk about it. Mm-hmm. You know, we need a new fridge. Oh, okay, well let's go shop for that together. I'm using fridge just like as an example.
Yeah.
This is a major appliance.
Well, this is because we're in our 40s now and we're married, and things like appliances are what we enjoy buying.
When that stuff goes on sale, I get excited. But yes.
We understand
you
why
get excited for new sponges.
We understand why people on The Price is Right used to jump up and down about the new kitchen appliances now.
Facts.
2-second question. Did you wait until marriage?
No.
No.
Did it change? Did your relationship change? Like your physical relationship change after you got married?
No. Well, it was better.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll spare you the rest.
That's it. That's all you need to know.
You two were relatively the same age, and you grew up in very similar economic, cultural, and religious backgrounds. Did these similarities make your marriage easier or harder?
I think it made things easier.
Yeah.
Because we both came from that, just like the question says, that we both come from a basic common understanding of
you're
this
both
is kind
Catholic,
this
you're
is
both
kind of where we are in life. Exactly. We're both Catholic, we both come from Italian families. So both of us knew how to act with the other's families.
What was expected, what was appropriate, what was not appropriate.
What was respectful.
Yeah. What was respectful, how holidays are traditionally handled. We're both from multiple children families. So I think all of those things made it much easier. And I think even in meeting an extended family, we could see shades of our own relatives in each other's families. So it made it easier to know these people and become family with them.
What advice would you give to teenagers who are dating and thinking about marriage? Or like young adults?
Because I was gonna say, if you're a teenager, don't think about marriage.
No.
When you first start dating somebody, don't think about marriage. Think about, do I like this person? Think about, more so even before you start dating, think about yourself and where you want to go in life and what you want for yourself. And try to have that relatively mapped out, even if, and you always have to leave room for change or flexibility. Because if at 22 you don't know where you want to go, you're not going to be able to find the best partner for you if you're not sure where you're going. You have to find somebody who wants relatively the same things as you. And that's another big piece of advice. Find somebody who shares overall your view of the world and how things should be and what's right and what's wrong. Because small things that you may disagree on now, 20 years from now, could become major differences that'll have a negative impact on the marriage. And when you're dating somebody, look at things that you might not necessarily consider. If you're on a date with somebody and they're being nice to you, but they're being rude to the bartender or rude to the waitress, they're not a nice person.
Mhm.
They're just presenting their best self to you. Watch how they treat people who are less fortunate. Watch how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Because outside of how they treat you, watch how they treat minorities, marginalized groups, to see if you agree in how those things should be handled. Because somebody who's being great to you but is verbally abusive to their mother, or talks negatively about every ex they've ever had, those are clues to their real character, not the representative you're necessarily getting on a date. And when you're considering marriage with somebody, think about the crappy side of the wedding vows.
Mm-hmm.
For richer, for poor, for sickness, health, better or worse. When things are better and health and richer, that's an easy time to have a happy marriage. There's not, there's not conflict, there's not stress. Think of the bad side of those, the sickness, the poor, the bad times, and talk about how those would get handled before you get to the altar. Uncle Joe and I were married barely 11 years. Uncle Joe had to have 3 major surgeries at that point. When you get married, you don't think of that side of it. And if you're not willing to step up and be the person they need a spouse to be in times of sickness, and there's been times where money was tight and we had to be really careful with how we spent. That's the side you have to consider, because that's when it's not easy to have a happy marriage. I remember after Uncle Joe's first heart surgery, he couldn't lean over, and I was helping him clean blood off his body, and he just looked at me and he went, "I am so sorry you have to do this." And I just looked at him and I said, "Sickness and health." I said, "No, nobody expected the sickness to be this early in the marriage, because sometimes it is. Sometimes these things are not a distant future."
Mm-hmm.
But when you're signing on for it, you're signing on for that too, not only the pretty part of it.
Yeah, that was like, what, 5.5 years into our marriage or so?
Yeah.
It was like 2014. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's when you're looking at things in terms of the bachelor way of dating, like your said, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
But nobody thinks about the being bedside after a surgery,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's them or one of their family members, and you have to be there to support them. You don't think about getting slapped with a multi-$1,000 bill out of nowhere, and all of a sudden now you got to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure this out? That's where like I said before, your teammate needs to be there.
If he's not going to sit beside your bed while you're in the emergency room all night,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter how many roses he buys you on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, and the person you are at 17 is not the person you are at 22, is not the person you are at 32.
And is not the person you are at 42.
No. So I feel like I found myself a partner that has been evergreen through all of that, and we change as we go. And we talk about that as we go. Both of us have had a journey. And we keep talking about it. I know I keep harping on that, but it's so true. If you're not fully communicating with that other person, like this is where I'm at, and then they're honest with you about where they're at in their journey, it doesn't work, because then you get lost, and it's very easy to separate from that other person, mentally, physically. It's so easy to have that happen.
I feel like the next two of the next questions are I'm gonna get basically the same answer. What advice would you give to a young married couple that is experiencing marital difficulties and thinking about divorce? And what would you say is the key to a happy marriage? I feel like you're gonna say communication for both of them.
Well, it's I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Why is the question I have, and it's for both of them, and to sit down, both of you, and say, what is it that you're not getting out of this marriage that both of you expects?
Find the problem.
Yeah.
Is the problem within one of you, or is the problem something outside on the two of you?
Mm-hmm.
If the problem is one of you is an addict who refuses to acknowledge a problem, that's different than this situation is something we're going through, and you have to figure out, can this problem be addressed and worked on as a team? Are you still willing to do that? is this something therapy or couples counseling? You know, if it's somebody is bipolar and refuses medication, that's not maybe a situation that can be worked through. But is one of you a chronic cheater? You know, these are things that you have to consider. What is the problem? And is there a feasible way to try to work through the problem, or is it not?
Yeah. Some of those things you mentioned, like those are a lot of those outward signs are symptoms. And you have to get at why is this person cheating? Why is this person gambling? There was a time when, especially after my father had passed, I was snapping at you, and I was just very angry, and I wasn't addressing the issues with myself. And after talking with your aunt, I realized I needed to go to therapy.
I was the safe place to put the anger.
Yeah, and I was not doing that in a healthy way at all, and I knew that I was damaging a relationship that we had. So I had to go do work on myself with therapy to do better there for myself and for our relationship. So that's just a prime example of, if you're having a problem, what's causing that problem, and being open and honest about why these things are happening and why we're seeing those symptoms.
And the key to a happy marriage, it really boils down to something very, very simple. Be nice to each other. Be nice to each other. Try to do things that, however small, help the other person, make the other person happy. You know, it's not always a grand gesture. You know, the best, most amazing thing Uncle Joe says to me on a regular basis is, what can I do to make your day easier for you? And that's where it is. The little things are what will make or break a marriage.
And sometimes you do, and a lot of times you really should be doing those little things without thinking, and you're just doing something to make the other person's life better. You do it without thinking. You do it without any expectation of what is this person going to do, because I'm doing it genuinely to make her happy. That I'll get up, and if I see her tea is low, I'll just make her tea. Or I'll go out, and like when I'm out and I see just something that I know she'd like, I'll just pick it up and just put it in the house without even saying anything.
There's been times where Uncle Joe has been in meetings from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and, you know, I will just open the office door and slip a sandwich and a coffee.
Or I'll hear the iced coffee.
and you know, because it's something that just makes his day a little bit better. And that's how you have to approach marriage.
Yeah. I'll tell you, like, I did this and this in the house, just to make your life a little bit easier today, because I know you've been out and running around like a mad woman all day.
Yeah.
To be loved is to be known. Do you think a couple should live together before they decide to get married? Why or why not?
I think that depends on the couple. We did not live together before we were married. We spent we were together almost every day. Pretty much except for the end of our engagement, because you were also in graduate school at that time. But you need to know little things, and sometimes the only way to do that is to live together. You know, if he leaves his socks on the floor after a shower, and that's something that's going to make you crazy, you want to know and address that, before you're married, because it will be a pair of socks on the floor in front of the shower for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Unless you address it.
Yeah.
So then, do you think like they should like travel together,
be
in a hotel room together,
travel together,
the airport together,
traveling with another human being.
So much about a person that way.
And this is not only marriage. This is your own family. This is friends. You learn so much about people when you travel with them, and I think maybe even more so than living together, because traveling can be stressful.
Yeah,
tells you a lot about a person.
Traveling is stressful. You do things like you can lose a boarding pass. You can lose like I've done. You can just lose things as you go.
You can get lost.
You can get lost. Heaven forbid something happened to you while you're traveling. Right. You want that person that you can rely on, and that those person's true colors are going to shine through.
In an airport.
When you're at the airport, or when you're in some foreign land, and you have to figure out how to make yourself better.
When you're standing on the side of the road in Italy because the bus broke down, and
yeah, that's true. when we're trying to figure out how to get back from a beach and have to make a left past some livestock.
Left at the goat.
Because that's our
Because we're
landmark.
lost in the Caribbean, yes. Yeah, and
True stories, by the way.
And
No, I believe that those are true.
these are all things like that tie into the watch how they interact, watch how they handle things. Because if you're lost and they're screaming, yelling, and cursing, that's how that person handles uncomfortable situations. And is this something that they can work on? Is this something they're willing to work on? And those are all things you want to know before you get married.
Yeah.
Looking back, what would you do differently if you could?
I'd put more time and effort into learning how to communicate in a more direct manner. And, where early in the marriage, it would be annoyed that the hamper, was overflowing, or, that something, the floor didn't get fixed. It was where that's something I would be yelling about the laundry. Now I know, hey, you know what? It's not really about the laundry. It's I don't feel supported, and I don't feel like you're helping me with the things I need help with. And now I know how to say that more directly and communicate that better, which makes it a lot easier to solve the problem.
Yeah, because then as soon as you say that, I'm like, oh, okay, and then we solve the problem, and that's it. But what I've done differently, obviously I would have learned how to communicate better earlier on, because that would have saved us a whole lot of heartache and a whole lot of fights. I would have chosen you more over work in certain situations, because I know that caused pain too, and it still causes pain. So I definitely would have chosen you over work, because you're here forever, they're not. So that would have been another big change I would have made.
All right, that was my final question. So, moral of the story: communicate with your partner.
Yeah.
That's the main takeaway.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for watching. Please give me 100.